Hi all, it's Sue Cook here. I hope you're all having a nice day on this lovely sunny day in March 2025. A couple of weeks ago, I was interviewed by Philly J. Lay for her wonderful podcast called The Wellness Way, and we got on really well. We had such a good chat, and we talked about loads of things, but there was still a few things that I wanted to talk about that we just didn't get onto, so I want to talk about them. And this is regarding neurodevelopment. So when I was talking to Philly, we were talking about eyes basically and how that affects dyslexia. So for example, if your tracking isn't working very well, which is your ability to keep your head still and move an object, if the muscles and nerves that control that aren't working very well, then that's going to affect your ability to read across a line of text, jump down to the next line and basically read. So just that one simple thing, if your tracking's not working. And this is one of the things we talked about. Another thing we talked about was when our pupils are too big and there's too much light going in, so that can create a dazzle type effect. And also, if you remember about photography, when you've got a large aperture, you have a small depth of field. So if your pupils are really big, then your depth of field that you're looking at is going to be quite small. So your distance vision is going to be just out of focus really. Another thing we talked about was eyes working together, being yoked, and that's kind of like the parallax effect. So if your eyes are working together, so say I'm staring at that, my eyes are a couple of inches apart and they're working together on that point, and that gives us depth perception. So that we can see distance, we see behind things. And some people who have dyslexia, in the case of my son, he had this, his eyes weren't working together. Again, you're not going to have depth perception. So that combined with large pupils, it's going to really mess up your vision. And also having Island syndrome, which is a light sensitivity thing. I used to have that with yellow paper and black writing. Other people have it with white paper and black writing and stuff like that. And I talked about all this when I was talking to Philly. And there's something that I discovered, which we didn't talk about, which I think is quite interesting. I'd love to know what you think. So remember I talked about eye movements. And yes, I have lost a fingernail from there. So we're talking about eye movements. If we remember about neuro-linguistic programming, with neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, the way they understand things is, say, for example, if we look up, we might be like imagining things or creating ideas in our head. Or if we look down, we might be accessing memory or thinking about something from the past. Or if we look to the side, we might be remembering auditory memory, for example. Now, if your tracking is not working and you can't track, as I said at the beginning of this, then are you going to have trouble accessing your creativity, your memory, your auditory memory? And that's probably the case. So if you think about when you're working with a dyslexic child, or even a very young child, when they're still learning to read, they might read a word on one page, but when you turn the page over and there's that word again, absolutely no recollection of it. And it can be because the visual memory and the processing just is not working right, and you can't remember what you've looked at. That might be one reason why that might happen. So tracking is really, really important. And also with EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is a trauma therapy that I also do, you do this, okay? So again, the importance of having eye movement is really, really key in the functioning of our brains. I just thought I'd mention that. And that's something that I kind of connected when I was training my students years and years ago now. But I thought that was an interesting point about how important tracking is. So you can test somebody, if you wanted to test somebody to see how their tracking is, just at a comfortable focal distance, just hold something up in front of them, ask them to keep their head still and follow it, and up and down and in a diagonal and maybe even in a circle. You might see jumps. The hardest one for people seems to be up to about the midpoint. People tend to jump on that bit, but just have a look and you can test each other and see how you get on. Something else that happened years ago, again, probably around 2007, 2008, when I was very first doing neurodevelopment. Prior to doing neurodevelopment, when I first trained as a homeopath, I was working with a lot of people who'd got OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. And that is generally considered to be a condition where there is a serotonin deficiency. And so I was working with these patients, and I was giving them serotonin and it wasn't really helping them. And I was giving them 5-hydroxytryptophan and B6, which is the serotonin pathway, supposedly. And they still really weren't improving that well. So, and I thought, that's disappointing, because I like to get people well when they come to me, obviously. And so I kind of clocked that in the back of my mind. And when I was learning neurodevelopment, my teacher Svea, way back, like I say, in like 2007, she said that neurotransmitters are self-regulating. Now, serotonin is a neurotransmitter, one of several. So, and I was thinking about this, and my kids were running around. It was summer, and I was just sitting down outside, just pondering. Neurotransmitters are self-regulating, and I'm thinking about the OCD thing, because with neurodevelopment, you're building new pathways, building new connections, and we can do that because of nerve growth factors. So in 1986, Rita Levi-Montalcini won a Nobel Prize for her work with nerve growth factors. So every time we learn something new, so for example, if what I'm telling you now is new, you're going to be making new connections in your brain and making new connections, right? So all those connections in the brain need neurotransmitters. So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, well, if neurotransmitters are self-regulating and you're giving them and they are not regulating, then that's not the problem. Maybe the problem is that there's not enough nerve pathways to support them. So that's why neurodevelopment is so important. I was thinking, this is me, way back. So if we're building new nerve pathways through neurodevelopment by physically building them or with new concepts, then the neurotransmitters will self-regulate in those places. I rang the head of my old university course and I said what I've just said to you, and the phone went quiet, and I thought, oh no, I've said something really stupid. And the phone was quiet for about a minute, and I'm thinking, oh. And then he came back to me and he said, I've been working in this field for many, many years and nobody has ever come up with that concept. I'm going to back you to do a master's, and I want you to lecture at the university. And that was around 2008 when all the funding got cut. So none of that ever happened, but it was quite an interesting theory. And I did a little bit of investigation into it at the time for quite some time, but I never really took that any further. However, if we consider it, it's still quite a valid idea around the importance of getting your ducks in a row with your nerves, so that your neurotransmitters will be functioning properly. I'm not suggesting that's a cure for OCD or anything. I'm talking about neurodevelopment specifically with regard to the learning issues that I've worked with since 2007, like dyslexia and so on. But I just thought I'd mention that because it's all just quite interesting stuff. And yeah, there's a little aside to various podcasts I'm doing at the moment. But if you want to get in touch with me, do so. I'm sucook@brainbars.co.uk. I have got the comments switched on my YouTube, but for some bizarre reason they always appear as being off, and I don't know how to fix that. So what do we do? So probably best to email me or contact me on Facebook or something like that, or on my Instagram, which is sucook_brainbars. I'll post some links below so you can get in touch with me. But in the meantime, I hope that was useful, and I'll catch up soon. Lots of love.